The storm outside had just barely started. The thunder rolled in the distance, rain tapping softly against the windows all over town. But inside a small, dimly lit bedroom miles away, a far worse storm was already tearing a little girl's world apart. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as she clutched an old, cracked phone. Tears streamed down her swollen cheeks, blurring the screen as she struggled to breathe. The night felt heavy, oppressive, the kind of darkness that made every sound feel louder, every shadow more threatening. Her small chest rose and fell in panicked gasps as she typed a message no child should ever have to write. Her name was Emily Carter. She was only 7 years old, yet her eyes held the weight of things no child should ever see. Tonight was worse than all the others. She had watched her mother collapse to the living room floor. She had heard a sharp, sickening crack, and she had seen her mother's arm bend in a way arms were never meant to bend. The only thing Emily knew was fear, and injuries and consequences that she could not fathom. And when she realized her mother wasn't getting up, she did the only thing she could think of. She typed a message to the only number she remembered, a safety contact from a school flyer. But in her terror, she typed it wrong. That one mistake, that accident, would change everything. Her tiny fingers hovered for a second before she hit send. He broke Mom's arm, please. Help us. While we discuss, if you believe in good karma, in second chances, and in the courage to step in right when it is needed most, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and tell us too, in the comments where you are watching from, because your support helps these stories reach more hearts like yours. As Emily wrapped herself up, whimpering softly, on the very other side of town, the buildings stood draped in silence under a very different world. In a cluttered garage filled with chrome reflections and the sharp scent of motor oil, a man named Jack Morgan wiped down the handlebars of his motorcycle. His heavy leather vest bore the insignia of some sort of biker club called Savage Wings, and was weathered enough to match the years on the tough and unkind road behind him. He had a hard face with an intimidating cast of features to most people. Behind the steeled mask, though, lay a sorrow that was never quite overcome. He was known for his strength, his silence, and an unshakable presence. But more than anything, Jack was known for one thing he could never do, to ignore anyone in need. When his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number, he barely glanced at it. Probably a wrong text, maybe spam. Then he read the message. He broke Mom's arm. Please help us. Jack caught his breath. All in a second, the past was pushing its way back into his chest. Those memories he'd carved out in his head of a violent father, a helpless mother, and a small boy who would go to bed every night and plead in his prayers for someone to come and save them. Nobody ever did. But over time, Jack had become the man he once needed. He didn't hesitate. He typed just 3 words. Words heavy with promise. Words he had no intention of breaking. I am on my way. She didn't know who had answered. She didn't care. She knew only that someone had heard her. Her mom, Sarah Carter, was lying on the living room floor, unconscious. She breathed in shallow, irregular gasps. In the kitchen, Sarah's boyfriend, Lucas Dean, walked back and forth drunk, mumbling cruel, broken words that only he understood. Emily hid behind the couch, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure it could be heard. She checked the front door again and again. She checked her mother's chest, praying it would keep rising. Every minute felt endless. The house felt like a cage, and every shadow seemed alive with danger. Meanwhile, Jack stormed out of his garage. He threw on his leather vest, boots striking the pavement hard as he kicked his motorcycle to life. The engine roared, ripping through quiet streets as he tore into the night. The address Emily sent was messy, letters scrambled, numbers out of place. But Jack knew this town, knew the streets to which desperate families retreated when life backed them into corners. Instinct, memory, the insistent tug in his chest that seemed to grow a little stronger with each mile, reminding him that somewhere out there a terrified little girl was waiting, counting on him to show up before it was too late. The rain lashed down harder, slanted horizontally as Jack drove his motorcycle faster and faster through the deserted streets. Cold seeped into his jacket, bit at his skin, but he didn't let up for an instant. He struggled against the elements, fought for every inch, his eyes scanning every block, every shadow for a glimmer of fear. And then he saw it. A dim porch light swayed and flickered before me, its intermittent blink like a frail pulse. A curtain billowed through the window, but for an instant, as if a child had scooted out of sight, Jack knew. This was the place. Inside, Emily clutched her mother's hands with her own, whispering urgently for her mother to wake up. She trembled with fear as she begged her mother to live. Just as Lucas burst back into the living room area, Emily held her breath and hid further back into the couch. His feet stomped heavily. Anger, violence. Cabinets rattled as he yelled and swore, demanding pain relievers and cursing Sarah for who knew What reason? As if he were annoyed with her at present for something, and not because he'd broken her. He never noticed the shadow that passed across the front window, and he never noticed when the motorcycle engine fell silent outside, but Emily did. It caused her heart to stop. Was that aid or something even worse? And then there was a knock on the slow, firm, controlled. A knock that came without an invitation. A knock that warned. Lucas spun around with rage exploding within him as he flung open the door. But as soon as he caught sight of Jack leaning against the doorframe, dripping wet from the rain and radiating an intimidating presence, Lucas' anger abated. His legs locked beneath him, as if he had walked squarely into the path of a wolf. Jack stood still, rain dripping from his beard, his eyes narrowing, scanning the room, and then, as he spotted Emily, his hard gaze relaxed. It was the first time all night that everything seemed stable once more. Jack entered with no need for an invitation. Just his presence changed the dynamic of the room, relegating violence to a corner and stripping it of its potency. Lucas tried to speak, tried to retake control, but Jack's silent gaze silenced him. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. All he had to do was position himself between the people he wanted to save and the danger. Emily carefully crawled out from behind the couch, shaking. As Jack knelt so he and Emily were at the same level, something inside Emily just broke, not from fear but from relief. Emily pointed at her mother on the floor, and Jack acted swiftly, checking Sarah's breathing and gently raising her head. However, he treated her not as a stranger, but as someone whose life mattered. Lucas attempted a protest. Jack paid no attention. He took out his phone and called an ambulance. Lucas stepped forward in a flash of anger, but Jack finally turned around. His eyes were hard as he read Lucas' warning signals. Lucas stepped back. He felt small and insignificant. Jack stuck with Emily when the paramedics arrived. Jack assisted with carrying Sarah on the stretcher. Jack followed the ambulance with the rain pounding down on him on his motorcycle, determined not to leave them alone even for an instant. Jack sat up all night at the hospital on a hard chair, letting Emily sleep with her head leaned against his leather vest. Periodically, he would get up and peer through the window at the hospital room, relief softening his features as he realized that Sarah's condition was no longer so critical. By morning, the police had already taken Lucas into custody. Emily's message and medical results had been enough. It was the first time in a very long while that safety hadn't seemed like an illusion. It was real. But then came something even Jack had not counted on. Sarah awakened with tears in her eyes, whispering her gratitude. Emily clung to Jack, refusing to let him go. And at that moment, something within Jack unlocked. It had been locked within him for so very long. But he had saved them. Yes. But in a sense, they had saved him too. Rescued him from loneliness, which had accompanied him throughout life. Rescued him from thinking he would never be anyone's hero. Jack didn't just vanish after that night. He repaired their broken door. He aided Sarah in her recovery. They took Emily on slow and gentle motorcycle trips down quiet streets, to let her laugh again, to let her be a child again. That house once filled with fear and dread began to fill with something new, second chances. Before we proceed with completing this tale, we would like to know your response to the following question. What would you have done if you received Emily's message below? Your voice matters. Emily became stronger and safer with time. Sarah regained her strength. And Jack, who once was a man driven by old wounds, found meaning. The life of all these people changed, with just one wrong message sent out of desperation. Or maybe, the right one all along. If this story has touched your heart, then like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because of your reaction, these stories will reach people who need hope and faith today.